Hello. Welcome back to my channel, Wanderlusting Lawyer, or perhaps welcome for the first time, in which case I'm very happy to have you here where I talk all things Camino de Santiago. I am talking today about the things I'm doing to avoid another dog attack on the Camino de Santiago. And I figured this is a good time to talk about this topic because I've seen a few reports recently, both on the Via de la Plata, which is a route that leaves from Sevilla, Spain, up to Santiago if you go all the way, about some incidents with dogs. Very rare on the Camino Frances and more common, I'd say, on the lesser walked routes. But let me be clear, and I hope you'll stick with me through the video. My goal here is absolutely not to fear monger or make you think a dog attack is inevitable, because it's actually the opposite. It's very, very, very rare on the Camino. But for me, not walking another Camino, even though I'm scared because of what I went through, which I'll talk about today, is not an option. So I had to come up with a game plan for what I'm going to do. And I've talked about this topic a little bit in my fears that arise when hiking the Camino video, and probably in some other videos, but I wanted to specifically just address only this topic in this video. So my goal here is to help you feel, if this is something you have kind of heard about and is making you think, hey, maybe I'm not going to walk the Camino, I hope you'll listen to this and to what I'm doing, and hopefully that might help you feel more confident as well. And one of the other reasons this topic is actually fresh on my mind, in addition to the posts I've seen in some Facebook groups, is that, as I've mentioned recently, my wife was injured, and unfortunately it was in an incident involving a dog. Obviously not Cashew, not our baby, but so I think dog incidents are fresh on the mind. So I want to make this video, and that's kind of the headspace that I'm in. My goal today is to educate, not scare. Never scare, just educate and try to provide information. So here's the background story on what happened. I was walking the Camino Aragonés in July 2021, but I decided to start. So that technically starts at the French-Spanish border in Samport, in Aragon, but you can start, it connects with the Arles, the Chemin de Arles, which goes through the south of France. And so you can start all the way back in Arles, or you can start anywhere along the route. And I had decided to start to follow the path of my now friend Nadine from Nadine Walks, wonderful channel, who started in Oloron-Sainte-Marie like 3 days before in France, and go from there. And so on my second day, I was walking in a very wooded area. And that's the thing. A lot of times the Camino trails, especially in France, and this is common with hiking trails in France in general, they pass through private property or behind private property. So the owners know, and I suppose tolerate this. I don't know if it's like a deed restriction or whatever, but I mean, they still have their animals on the property. And a lot of times these are farming properties, and so they're guard dogs. And I'd already seen a couple dogs that had made me feel nervous the past few days, just loose, barking on the side of the road. So one dog that was in a yard who was jumping so high, I was convinced he was going to jump over the fence, barking really loudly at me. And keep in mind, I didn't have a dog yet, so even though I loved dogs, I didn't really understand dog communication. So I'm sure I might have been startled by behavior that wouldn't have startled others who've grown up with dogs and had dogs their whole life. But I'm always very respectful, keep my distance. But and parts on these in France anyway, you actually have to open and close gates on the path because cows use the path. So I opened the gate, and just as I was closing it, I heard a dog start to bark like, hey, I hear someone on my territory. What are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. Prepared myself, was calm, don't make eye contact, calmly keep walking forward. And this dog, it was like a medium shepherd type of dog, made extremely clear that I was not getting past. He was baring his teeth, growling, barking, and getting closer. And so luckily, this is one of the reasons I say carry at least one pole, but definitely two if you have any fear. I was able to hold my poles out in front of me in an X-type fashion and start to advance. But I was, yelling something out of instinct, I suppose, but I also had heard the owner's voice. And so I was yelling at the owner, like, in French, like, come get your dog. He, is coming after me. I don't know, whatever I was saying. So I was trying to do everything I was supposed to do, except for perhaps staying silent. But to me in that moment, that was not an option. And so, the dog kept getting closer. Thankfully, the owner came down. But as he came down, the dog just ran away. So he couldn't even get control of his dog. I was extremely upset. The owner was so confused. He's like, but he's not mean. He's not mean. And that's, what they usually say. So then I just wanted to keep going. I got maybe 50 feet. The dog circled back around and came at me again. So I was so startled, I screamed again. Then the owner came running back. The dog ran away again. And so the owner had no control over his dog, right? There's no obedience here. Owner takes off after the dog. Wife comes around with her car and is trying to understand what happened again. But he's not a mean dog. I was like, well, he doesn't like people here, and this is a Camino trail. So you need to, there I had seen some older ladies, I think said they were in their 70s, coming up behind me. And I was like, there's more people coming on this path. You can't have your dog out here loose if this is, the reaction. And so finally I saw the owner had gotten the dog and put him in the car and they left. But it was a really traumatic experience for me. I am 100% certain I would have been bitten if I did not have my poles. Unfortunately, I couldn't turn around and go the back way because I had the gate door behind me. So there was really no way, unless I was going to turn my back on this dog, to get out safely. Because sometimes they say, hey, turn around, came back from where you come from, wait a few minutes, and then keep going. It was forward, back, or wait. And so I was trying to advance forward. So there was really no other way to get out of this situation. I don't know what would have happened if the owner hadn't come. Thankfully, he did. So what was interesting was that then, probably an hour or two after that, I was in a cafe and I was talking to some other hikers that were there, because at this point that Camino route crosses with another pretty big hiking route in France that basically follows the Pyrenees. And I was telling them what happened, and almost every one of them had a story about being bitten by a dog when hiking. They're all avid hikers, and they said it's become a huge problem in France because the wolf population has, thankfully, I suppose, regenerated, but then they're coming after flocks. And so the owners are getting, this wasn't a Pyrenees, but they're getting guard dogs. And sometimes they don't know or they don't care that people are hiking. And so actually I was doing some research on it. The number of dog attacks on French hikers, especially in cyclists, has really skyrocketed in recent years. But in general, the mentality has been, it is the hiker or the cyclist's fault. I guess, I don't know, for straying from the path or whatever, but I was on the Camino path. There was nowhere else I could have gone. And I was very unlucky. This was a narrow path in a forest, gates in front and behind me. And also another thing to keep in mind is that, at least in France, so I've had multiple French people tell me this. I've had a dog communicator, whisper if you want, tell me this. Until recently, the mentality in France has really been that if a dog bites you or attacks you, it's something you did wrong. You got in their space, you egged them on, it's really been sympathy toward the dog, which is a different experience in general than what we have here in the States. I'm not saying which one's right or wrong, but so I think that has done a disservice towards trying to prevent or mitigate these incidents on the Camino, at least in France. So that's my story. I have heard reports about incidents in Portugal. And again, I know recently in Spain on the Via de la Plata, there have been incidents. It's not common at all from what I've heard, but the rest of that Camino Aragonés, I was scared. I would hear a dog bark anywhere and I would have an instant, Pavlov's dog reaction to that bark was the dog loose? Were they going to come and get me? And of course, there are tons of sweet dogs on the Camino. Like that's part of some of my best memories from the Camino Frances were these really cute dogs that would kind of just roam around the street and love to pet. But the question for me became, you know, if I have people telling me dog attacks happen on hikes, it's actually not very uncommon, and it is what it is. The authorities probably won't do much to help, again, at least in France. And I also want to keep doing the Camino, but I'm scared. What are my options? And so what I have done is develop kind of like not a three-pronged plan, but I have 3 options in my repertoire to try to protect me going forward. One is my poles that I mentioned. So these are great because this is the position I was in to try to protect this part of my body. And I mean, it did work. The dog didn't lunge. So at least in that way, the poles did their job. I would have at some point had to do something differently if the owner hadn't come, as we've discussed, but they bought me that time. So that was really important. The second thing I have is, so this is not like a rock I'd use, but a rock. So I usually keep a small rock in my short pocket, or I've heard, you know, even the act of kind of crouching down, looking like you're going to pick up a rock and throw it is a universally understood symbol by a lot of animals. And I don't know if you guys ever saw that video a couple years ago by the guy that was like being continually followed by, I think it was a bobcat. And it wasn't until he finally was able to, and he was able to film it the whole time. It wasn't until he was finally able to bend down and get a rock and throw it that the animal finally ran away. You don't throw it at the animal. Usually you just kind of startle them to get them out of that mindset. So I try to keep a rock in my pocket. And then this was my purchase for the Camino Inglés because I was going to be walking alone and I was nervous. Let's see if you guys can see this. I'll hold it here. See if I get a good view on it. Yeah, so this is a dog horn. I think it's good for other safety purposes as well. It's real loud. I travel with it in this plastic container. I keep this so that, you know, it doesn't get accidentally triggered in my suitcase. And it has, here, I'll take it out and show it to you guys. I don't even know if, like, you know, tear gas and some of that stuff is legal in Spain. I'm not personally in a mess with that. I think this is, I'm feeling comfortable with this horn. But you see there's this clip on the back. So I actually just have it clipped in my backpack pocket in a way that I can access it in, you know, less than a second if I need to. And it is extremely loud. I've tried it one time. Poor Cashew running away. So it did work. The nice thing is that even if it doesn't necessarily deter a determined dog, hopefully somebody near you hears it and can come help you. So I carry this, especially for women. I think, yeah, like I said, this can have multiple safety purposes, but those are the 3 things I'm doing to bring me a level of comfort around what if there's another incident with a dog. Like, I have to just accept that that's my fear. You can't just say, you know, every time someone posts about this incident, there's always the people that comment of, oh, you just needed to stay calm, or, oh, you must have looked at the dogs in the eyes. I mean, that's not true. Like, I know so many times that people have had incidents with dogs where, you know, something in that moment just didn't go right. There's nothing that could be done differently. It's just is what it is. And so for me, preparing myself for the maybe not if, but when that could happen again, I clearly hope it never does, and I hope this never happens to you. I feel better about it because I'm ready, right? So those are my thoughts on how I'm keeping myself safe against another dog attack. And let me know if you have any other ideas. Let me know if you are worried about this, if it's an issue for you, or if you've had similar incidents. And I hope you guys appreciate my vulnerability with this story. It's still sometimes not easy for me to talk about, again, especially with what just happened with my wife. But, you know, in general, dogs are wonderful. Cashew is like my favorite thing in the whole world. I can imagine life without him. But unfortunately, there can be incidents. And so I hope this helps you guys think about different ways you can be prepared. If that was helpful, please, I would appreciate if you could just hit the like button, drop a comment below, engage with the channel. It keeps me connected to you and motivated to keep sharing content. And yeah, I just like having that dialogue. So thanks for watching. And as always, buen camino.